It's really related to
Oh my goodness me.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. You might see me poking around on my computer. I'm actually kind of testing something out tonight. It's kind of interesting. I'm gonna be broadcasting this live on YouTube actually. So it helps me record the event for later, which I have been doing for the last couple of years. But if you ever can't make it and you want to sit in at that time, I can take chat, conversations, questions, that kind of stuff. So it's something I'm just trying out this time. So you might see me. I'm going to try to put the presentation on the screen as well as I'm going through a little bit later. A couple things that I just want to highlight before we actually get started. First of all, welcome. Thanks for coming. And it's always important that you guys are here. I think that having informed parents and students, thank you for our 2 students that are here tonight. I think it's very important that you guys know what's going on. This junior year is a very important year. And so being able to understand that, know what's coming up is pretty crucial. And, we don't have as many people as probably should attend these things because I often get the same questions over and over. And so encourage your friends to either watch the video if they weren't here or also to come next time we have an event. I know that we only do it every once in a while, so sometimes nights and weekends don't really work out super well. But we will go through a lot of information. And so just a tip that I am giving you guys is that I'm not expecting you guys to memorize everything that I'm telling you. There will not be a pop quiz. Okay, so I just want you guys to just pay attention, ask as many questions as you guys need. And we're going to go through a lot, okay? It's going to take us a good hour and a half. I know, it's a long time. Students, be lucky I don't do that to you in class. But right now, you're kind of stuck with it for a little bit. All right, so we're going to work on that together. We'll actually walk through a few different things. And so what I want to do now is actually pull up some information about what we're going to be doing tonight. So we will be taking a look at these transcripts. This is not your individual transcripts. This is a demonstration transcript. All right, so we'll be looking at some of the pieces of that and making sure you guys are really clear on what those pieces are. We'll also be talking about some basics of the college search process. We will be starting to talk more and more about college, and a lot of it is primarily four-year college because that is typically the most complicated process. We will mention some information about 2-year and community colleges, and 2-year community and junior college are all synonymous with one another. Okay, so you'll hear many different times, and I try to use them all in different ways. But they all mean the same thing. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about the tests that are going to be coming up this year because that's a pretty big year for the tests and the different types of tests and what that all means. And we'll definitely spend some time reviewing any questions you guys might have. All right, I'm going to shoot for us getting out of here sooner than an hour and a half, but like I said, I can't 100% guarantee. All right, so this is something I want to share with you guys primarily because 1, I'm excited, but 2, it may impact you at some point. This is my son. This is Joel. Okay, Joel was born in June, is 2 months old now. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because I may have to actually, throughout this year and in upcoming years, unfortunately, maybe have to cancel appointments at last minute. Babies get sick. All right, so I want to give you guys fair warning that, if you ever get a cancellation email or a phone call early in the morning saying, I'm sorry, but I have to stay home with my son, please know it's not because I don't value your meeting time. Not that I don't want to meet with you guys, but my wife also has a full-time job, and I can't expect her to be the only one that stays home if he ever gets sick. All right, hopefully he'll be a very healthy baby, and I can be here as often as I can be. All right, and I do apologize tonight. I am a little bit under the weather, so I'll be trying to talk as clearly as possible, but I may have to stop and take a drink every now and then. A couple other changes that you may have noticed. One is going to be our website. All right, so if you've come on our website prior to the summer, you'll notice now when you go back on there that it looks fairly different. Most of the changes are good, but it did make for a confusing few months or weeks for me too. I had to figure out where everything else moved. I wanted to selfishly show you where my information is. All right, there's a lot of great information on the website, but the new place that you'll find my information, which is where you'll make appointments, request transcripts, and things like that, is actually underneath the programs tab. There's not an actual link on the main homepage. Now you have to actually navigate to the programs, and then it's almost to the bottom of that list. Once you click there, it's actually going to open up a very similar looking page from the old site. A lot of the same information, and if you scroll down, there's more information on this page. But I did kind of reorganize, and I'm still working on making some transition pieces, bringing information from the old site into the new one. But you can see the second link down has my appointment system. The third one has our Novance Family Connection. Juniors, you will be getting more and more used to this tool as you guys go forward. Okay, so that's just something fairly important that I want to make sure you guys can find and identify. And as we go into the junior year, we will actually be doing a lot more talking about the actual college process and getting down to the nitty-gritty college information. And you know, you've kind of, many of you guys have started that process and talked more grand scheme of things. We actually are going to be starting to get down to actually how do we putting rubber to the road and make things happen. All right, so there are three different areas of school counseling, and the one that you might be accessing more is this college and career counseling, this first red circle. And there's a bunch of resources if you click that link. The last one is also a wonderful and underutilized tool. It's called the counseling resources area. Underneath there, though, there is a section that says grade level resource folders. That's what it's called. And what that is, it's different shared Google Drive folders that you have access to as the public, that you can go in and download things. You can't add a bunch of stuff, but you can access anything that I put in there. So for example, tomorrow, I should have done it today, but tomorrow, this presentation in PDF format will be in there. So you can access this later if you want to. There's a lot of information about college applications, about career research. There's a ton of resources, and I've tried to organize it into different folders so you can easily find your way around. If you guys ever have any information that you find useful in your digging and research, please send it my way. I do appreciate learning more. I love to find things out. And in this world of college admissions, in this world of just counseling in general, there's a lot of ever-changing information. So if you find something, please send it my way, because I may have something that's outdated. Okay, and you might have run across something new. If it's something that you guys find, typically that means other parents probably would find it useful as well, and I'll add it to this folder. All right, so just simple email, and I'll be happy to take a look at all of that information. One thing I'm going to pass around as we get going is this folder. This piece of paper, flyer, that's what I'm going for. This flyer, and this flyer is actually a pretty cool event that's going to be coming up on October 8th. And it's what's called the Mock College Admissions Case Study. Okay, first one in our area. We have not had one like this before. And it's a pretty cool event that we're hoping to make kind of an annual or biannual type of thing. But basically, I'm working with the counselors from Sugar Bowl Academy and Tahoe Expedition Academy and myself. We put this together in the spring and throughout the summer this year. And it's going to be happening on October 8th from 3 to 5 p.m. That's a Saturday, just so you know, here at the school. And what happens is we're actually going to have reps, admissions people, so people who actually read applications coming from University of Chicago, Berkeley, UCLA, Linfield College, Miami of Ohio, St. Lawrence, and Birmingham Southern College, which is a smaller liberal arts college in Alabama, all coming here to actually help us understand, and how do you guys actually participate in the admissions environment, all right? And sit through and read through an application, and you guys actually will become the admissions panel and decide whether these students get in, get waitlisted, or get denied. Okay, so it's a very unveiling way to look at the college admissions world. So I encourage you guys to come there. One side note about that I will just give you guys, that I've been asking them to give too, because I think there might be some misconceptions when people come. This is not a college fair. Okay, so there are some names on here that I know that many of our students would probably rather go sit with. Unfortunately, that won't be a possibility. We'll be randomly assigning you a group to go attend with. Okay, so, and we will make sure that you'll be going there, because that's how the case study works. At the end of the event, each college will come back to the whole group and talk about their own priorities and how they look at admissions in a shorter format, but it will give you an opportunity. It's not so much about how individual schools process admissions, it's about how the entire admissions process works. Okay, so I just wanted to give that disclaimer as well. And then, so I'll pass this around. One nice thing, I didn't print out a whole bunch of copies, but this has been emailed out. I will email it again. But if you guys have a phone, feel free to snap a photo of it. There is a registration link that I would request that you guys complete if possible, because then we can plan for how many people. We've already got over 100 people signed up. Okay, so it's going to be a pretty hopping event. Please register. It's pretty simple and painless, and it's free. The second thing that I'll just highlight is what's called Remind. And Remind is a great tool that we use here at the school. I've used it in the past infrequently, I plan on increasing the usage this year. And so I would encourage you guys, both parents and students, to sign up. I actually have 2 different groups going for the junior class. One is a parent group, one is a student group. The flyer that I'll be handing around is actually the student group. So students in here, if you guys are interested, it's nowhere near a requirement, but if you're interested, it basically allows me to send out quick, short reminders, essentially via text message. All right. But the nice thing too is you guys can actually ask questions back. Okay. So instead of waiting for all those phone calls and the voicemails you might not get to for a couple of days, like I do, it allows you to see in a quick, hey, reminder, there's an event coming up tonight. All right, so you sign up, there's some instructions here, and then on the screen is actually the code for the parent group. So it just says L parent 18, but all the instructions are exactly the same. Okay, so I'm gonna pass this around, feel free to take a picture of that. And again, the code is just L parent 18. All right, I'm gonna flip over this thing to our screencast real quick, just so people can follow
Jeff's right,
along
the L
with me.
parent 18 goes instead of the
Lakers.
Lakers.
It's just that code at the end. So that's all the same, and then you just replace that. There's like a code that says Lakers 2018 on there for the students, and it's just the other one for everybody else.
Got it.
All right. Okay. So as we jump into this, okay, I wanted to do a quick reminder. There's some new people in the room, and as well as some reminders for people that have been here for a while, of our community service requirement. All right, we do have a community service requirement that is part of our graduation pathway. So students will not receive a high school diploma without documented 30 hours by the time essentially end of May rolls around of their senior year. Okay, so that's just an important thing to remember. Students who are new to our school, we do prorate your hours. All right, we are not going to hold you accountable for the hours that you might have missed from being at a different school. Okay, but most students, it's a great opportunity for you to get some additional hours as needed. Okay, yes.
Does it have to be at the lake, or can it be an arena?
It can be an arena. So there, we will be essentially being a little bit more strict. Well, I'll say a lot more strict on our pre-approval process. Okay, so that is something we've been kind of phasing this process in over the last 3 years. And becoming a little bit more strict with each different process. That, all of this stuff is required by board policy, but we realize it's a new process for a lot of people, so we've been phasing it in. But we will be checking for pre-approval much more closely this year and going forward. Okay, the pre-approval actually happens through your Pathways teacher. So if you have an event that you're going to be doing, you need to talk to your Pathways teacher prior to doing that event, and they will clear it. They will probably ask for a parent's signature prior to signing off themselves. Okay. Primary reasons for this is because we want to make sure that you know what your student is doing, that you know that we will give you credit for this, okay, and that your student is safe. Like that, we don't want you being surprised that your student's picking up trash on the side of the road and almost getting ran over. Okay, that's not the goal of community service. Some other things that maybe you want to think about that are typical questions that we get. One of them is, when can I meet my 30 hours? So some students may already have 30 hours completed. That is totally fine. If you've already done that, guess what? You can graduate. Okay? Your graduation requirement has been met. However, in Pathways, you also have the secondary requirement, which is a yearly hour requirement. So for this year, you're going to have 8 hours. And then in your senior year, you're going to have 8 additional hours. Okay, those are tied to your Pathways grade. So if you do not care, well, maybe I shouldn't say it that way. If you would like to receive a pass on your Pathways grade, you should do the 8 hours of community service. Say it that way. So if you do not do those hours, even though you can still graduate, you won't get the pass for the 2-credit Laker Pathways class. Okay, and then always just keep copies of those papers for your records. We occasionally, very rarely, misplace things. Doesn't make it down to the office. So if you have copies, it just makes us double safe. Okay. Reminder that we're expecting 1 to 2 hours of homework a night. As a junior parent, you probably know this by now. School's a lot of work. Okay, so this is just your opportunity to make sure that they're coming home and doing their work regularly. And this does not necessarily include only homework. This can include a lot of different things. This is reading. Right now, a great activity is actually doing college research. Okay, it's a wonderful tool that students can actually utilize. And so that's just another thing that we want to make sure that students are doing. And the other thing that I really want to emphasize is this year I would like to see a lot more studying happening, okay, especially for exams, okay, because in high school, I think we've seen kind of what I would call maybe intermittent AP test scores come back over the last couple of years, and I don't think it's anything having to do with like how the class is being taught, because it's being taught consistently with the AP exam process. It's actually an approved process. I think the thing that's inconsistent is the amount of studying that students are actually putting in prior to those exams. I think the mentality is there that we have to, we've taken this class, so we can just come to the test. We should know everything because we took the class and we got an A. Okay, so I really want to kind of emphasize that study prep process. Okay, that AP exams really do take a month to 3 months before those exams actually happen to really be fully prepared of pretty good studying. Same thing with the SAT exam, the ACT exam. They're not something you just roll out of bed on a Saturday and expect to do well. Okay, question in the back, yeah.
So you say that, question I have is, have you guys done anything to prep the students on how to study?
So yeah, I do RTI workshops that are fairly lowly attended.
Okay, so that's the challenge.
Yep. So unfortunately, there's not a ton of time. We work with students in pathways in different grade levels on study skills and things like that. And the teachers do in AP classes do some work on studying for those individual tests. But a lot of what I do is optional, and students choose not to come.
No, I understand. Thanks. So I guess the challenge that I see is the system that's in place does a lot of catering for kids to do homework during school. And then also there are like, pre-test sort of exercises. So I think my opinion is the students think that there's a lot of the work is done. So I get what you're saying, and I agree with you, but how do you do it? Because the methodology that's been taught is do homework, do your prep. There's a lot of, test prep. Mm-hmm. That's it.
So a lot of stuff that if say, for example, your student comes home and says, I did my work at school, which is not an uncommon thing. I hear that a lot too. I got my work done, or I finished in class. I had practice, so I did it after school before practice. So a lot of that is true. Students do have the opportunity a lot of times to do some work, and a lot of them do get things done. My advice would be, it's not just the homework. Okay, so the test prep piece, typically you cannot complete in 20 minutes a day at school. That's just not something that's possible. Okay. And the other piece that I'll talk about later is it's not so much about getting an A on the exam. It's about knowing and retaining the content. And that's the thing that's going to take much, much longer. Okay. And that's the thing that takes revisiting prior concepts. It takes scaffolding back up those things that we've maybe covered in 3 chapters ago, but spending 20 minutes and actually writing through the steps that need to maybe get to this step later that you're currently on, reviewing that baseline foundational piece. That's some of the stuff that's missing, because when you start looking at the SAT and the AP exams, some of these big high stakes exams, a lot of it it's not just pre-calculus, the class that all the juniors are taking or whatever it might be. It's going to be algebra, geometry, algebra 2, pre-calculus, and maybe even some beyond. And they need to know all of those different concepts and be able to reproduce it consistently throughout the year. So that's kind of my piece of why doing this, even if they don't have necessarily something to do. I argue there can always be something to do. And if there's not, the teachers can definitely help provide something to do. They have tons of work that they can give. So that's just my 2 cents about, that 1 to 2 hour timeline. Getting on Naviance, doing some college research. That's a great use of the 1 to 2. Reading is a wonderful skill. Okay, reading for fun builds your vocabulary, builds that ability to answer those SAT questions, to write strong essays for college, just your natural love of reading. Okay, it grows all those things. Those are all wonderful 1 to 2 activities. And I'm sorry if that didn't totally answer the question, but that's kind of what I got right now.
Yeah. So just quick one
Sure.
more, is when do you have those classes then when I can go?
So we have RTI classes throughout the year. So for example, I don't have.
Where's the feature? Is it on the website?
So I send it out over emails. I sent out one. I don't have one coming up recently because I have a bunch of different meetings happening right now with grade levels. My first one is going to be a common application workshop, or it might be an essay workshop. I forget. In about a week or 2. primarily geared towards seniors because they change, but juniors, sophomores, anybody's welcome to come. So it's announced in the announcements. It's sent out via email. This wonderful remind app that I just sent around. Okay, so those are how the pieces of information get out to students. Let's take a look. So hopefully you guys all grabbed a copy of these transcripts. Yeah, and if not, there's a whole pile up here. So we'll take a quick look at these because I think it's very important that you guys fully understand what's on this. This is your legal document that kind of proves your process through your high school education. All right, this is something that will follow you most likely for the rest of your life. We get transcripts requests from 1960s, okay, and they have to go dig through the files and typewritten stuff. So it gets much more complicated when it's a little bit of an older transcript. But this transcript will, you will access this transcript throughout your life for different reasons, whether it's a job verification, possibly like applying for homeownership or some other opportunity that might become available to you, plus going to college. Okay, so it's very important that we know what's on here, that we also track kind of what the process looks like. Okay, the first thing I want you guys, you can't do it on this one, but when you guys have access to your own, juniors, you should have gotten yours in Pathways, or also you will very soon. This is also available through the Aries account, which is the parent portal. It just looks a little bit different, but has all the same information. The first thing I want to have you guys check and make sure all of their demographic and name information is correct. Because again, very rarely mistakes are made. A space is added when it shouldn't be. It should match exactly what's on your birth certificate, driver's license, social security card. Okay, it shouldn't be a nickname. Shouldn't be Billy when your name is Bob. Okay, it needs to be your full legal information. Same thing with your birth date. Your name and your birth date are two very important things, because that's a lot of times what colleges will use to kind of match you up with yourself. Okay, so double check that's all correct. It should be, but every once in a while we catch little things. We want it to be as accurate as possible. When you're looking at this, kind of how you read a transcript, at the top here in this upper left-hand corner, we start with 9th grade. We kind of go down a column, and then it goes up to the next column and down. So we go by columns. And the one you see in front of you has all the way through, they've started their senior year. Okay, so this is a senior. Okay, just finishing their junior year. So this is what yours will look like probably by the end of this year. You'll see a couple codes next to all these classes. There's a key down at the bottom if you're ever curious what, say, a P or an asterisk is, and some of these different ones at the bottom. Most of the ones that you'll typically see is that asterisk, which means a non-academic or essentially non-core class. An A is a weighted course, so it's going to be an AP course or a UC transferable college course. And then P stands for college prep, which essentially means A through G approved. Okay. The next thing over is the name of the class, and this is where it's important. If you took photography like this student did, or at least that's what this says, and you really took art, that's not really a good thing. So you want to make sure that not only are your grades correct, your name is correct, but all the classes that you have taken in the past correct. Okay. Again, the only difference between, say, maybe photo and art is probably 1 or 2 numbers being entered. All right. So it's just very important that you guys are checking those things, double checking our work to make sure that we are representing you well. The next thing over is probably the most important thing that people look at is your grades. All right. A couple things about your grades. We are A, B, C, D, and F. You also will see a P and an NP. A P is a pass and an NP is no pass. Those 2 grades are not included in the GPA. Okay, so that's the difference there. So P and NP are not included in the GPA. Pluses and minuses are not calculated in the GPA either. All right, so it's A, B, C, D, F. Those are the only GPA weighting that they see. Yes?
So if you have a C minus, it's a C?
It's a C in the GPA. Still a C minus, but yes, in the GPA calculation, it's no different. There's not like a plus adds a 0.25 credit or something like that. The next one over, you'll see 2 columns. One says, at the top says, ATT/CMP, attempted and completed. So what you've attempted for credits and what you've completed. Those 2 columns should be equal unless you've either failed the course or received a no pass. All right, so that's just something you need to know about that. Almost everyone, unless you're getting some of those grades, will have those equal, so you hardly ever need to check that. But if you ever do fail or no pass a class, they should be different. At the bottom of each of those sections, you'll see a total credits attempted and total credits completed, plus a semester GPA. All right, so that's going to be listed, and that's only those classes that you see above it. All right, down at the bottom is actually where you have the cumulative or total added up as you go GPA. If students take other classes, or say you moved here from a different school, it will actually show up on a different, it won't say North Tahoe High School. We actually transcribe your transcripts onto ours, and basically you'll see Squad Prep, you'll see Sierra College, Coldstream, classes like that. So any class that you take that's not offered through our high school will actually show up listed on our transcript, as long as it's something we can list, as a class from that individual institution. All right, so Coldstream classes, if you're taking like a one-off Coldstream class, independent study, it does not get added as a North Tahoe High School grade. It gets added as a Coldstream grade. All right, they actually go in and add them themselves. We cannot change grades. Okay, so Sierra College just sends us a grade and be like, well, the teacher messed up. I really got an A and it really says B. You're gonna have to work with that individual school or BYU or Coldstream, because I can't even go in and change our own teachers' grades. The teachers have to change their own grades. That is one of the biggest control things that teachers have, is their grading. All right, and so unless a teacher signs off on a form, that grade is not getting changed. We legally cannot do it. All right, so that's just something to know as well, in case there's ever an issue if you do identify something, which we have, and we're working on fixing a few things. Let's see, moving down to the bottom left-hand corner. All right, this is another important area, this highlighted yellow area up on the screen. So we actually have 6 different GPAs that we report. All right, 6 total ones. Actually two columns. One is a weighted and one is a non-weighted. The weighted includes those extra GPA points for your AP coursework. So those advanced placement coursework, and then any UC transferable course that we've approved to go on your transcript. All right, and there are differences. Okay, so some courses we do not list, some courses we do, and they do all have, any course that we do list does have to be pre-approved. Okay, that's a very important thing. So if you guys go take a class and then send us a transcript, we're not going to put it on your transcript. You can still report it to the colleges, but it's not going to be added in here and count toward your graduation.
Unless you get pre-approval.
Yes, pre-approval, and we have some stipulations for that pre-approval process, but if you get pre-approved and it's all okay, then it will be added, we will be able to add it here for high school dual credit. Let's see, so the weighted and non-weighted, we talked about that a little bit. The top one is actually your academic GPA. That's including 9, 10, 11, and 12, or so far to date. This student obviously doesn't have any 12th grade grades yet. But those academic classes are going to be any class without an asterisk next to it. That's going to be where that asterisk comes into play. They throw out the non-academic or non-essentially core classwork. All right. The one below that is that's those same classes, but they actually throw out your 9th grade year. The reason why we have that one on there is because as we start looking at colleges, the UC and the CSU system does not actually use 9th grade in your GPA calculation. Okay, so that might be a rejoicing factor, or that might be a really horrible factor depending on your 9th grade. Okay, they still use 9th grade to determine eligibility. They still look at 9th grade grades. They still look at 9th grade classes. So don't hear me say 9th grade just disappears. It by far does not. Okay, but in terms of their GPA calculation, and this is only a rough estimate, they actually recalculate it totally themselves through their application system. So they're actually you're gonna plug in all the classes that are A through G. They'll list it. They actually cap the number of AP credits you can receive. They'll see it uncapped, a capped, and a non-weighted. It's fairly complicated, but the good thing is you have no control over it. It's only sign up for the best classes you can take. When you do the application, they take it from there. Okay, so there's no gaming that system really, so it's not really something that a lot of people really need to stress out about, but it is something you need to know, is that they don't use the GPA that even is listed here. It'll probably be slightly different. It's fairly close from my experience, but it's usually off a little bit. The bottom one is total GPA. Those are every A, B, C, D, F grade that you've received. Again, pass and no pass is not included in there. You'll see all of your credits attempted and completed down below there, and then right below that is the class rank. Okay, this class is the last class. If you have younger students, this is the last class that will have class rank. You will no longer be ranking students after your class. A lot of different reasons why, but this is the last time we will actually have that, and ultimately, the main reason why class rank even exists still is because people still have a benchmark valedictorian system, which we do not. Students will still have their GPA reported. They'll still have all the information that colleges need to be able to make decisions about them. And we've done a lot of research, consulted with a lot of different colleges and all different levels. See you later. And so that's kind of the direction our school is going. it creates an unfair and unhealthy level of competition among students when really, if we're on a benchmark system, we actually will not even technically have valedictorians this year. They have what we call summa cum laude and cum laude students, because that is what the system we have is actually modeled off of. It is not a true valedictorian policy. Okay, so that will actually be disappearing for students after you, but it will still be there for you, and it's based on your total weighted GPA. All right. And yes, there are ties, just in case people are wondering about that. So if you're like, what's your number? 5. What's your number? 5. Wait, that's okay. They can actually be tied. That means you guys have the same GPA. Any questions so far? I have one more area of the transcript, and we'll move on. All right, still with me? Okay.
I guess I have one. So
Sure.
Sierra College classes are included in this GPA,
If it's on your transcript.
if it's on your transcript.
Yes. So if it's not on your transcript, no. But yes, if we've taken it for credit, then it's a weighted, it's essentially similar to a AP course. Okay. On the bottom right-hand side is your credit summary. Again, this is high school graduation credit. All right, so this is not college credit like I've talked about before. High school and college requirements are fairly similar, but have some very distinct differences. This is only for high school graduation. All right, so you won't see, for example, the fine arts and foreign language are one combined requirement, where the college requires 2 years of a foreign language and 1 year of fine arts separated. Okay, so that's the difference that you'll see. College does not require a career technical education course, and we require 1 year of a career technical education course. Those are some of the differences you'll notice. And the other thing you will notice that I get a lot of panicked emails usually after I talk about this, or they get their transcripts in their hands or go to their graduation status report is, but I'm in English. Why does it say 10 credits? I still need 10 credits. That is, don't worry, that will go away after you get your grades. Okay, so it's not an in progress credit yet. So it'll show up here, but then once you complete, say, first semester in January, 5 of those credits of, say, this student's English 12 will become completed, and there will still be 5 left as needed for that second semester of their senior year. Okay, so don't worry about that piece, but it is something that you guys should somewhat pay attention to, and that's what this sheet will be helpful for. And your students will get a copy of their own transcripts in their pathways classes, and will actually be walked through this process of checking off how they're doing in terms of high school graduation. And then if they want to extend it and go to college and stuff like that, they can mark off whatever else they need for that. Okay, but that's the activity they'll be doing in the future. All right, so any questions about transcripts, kind of where we're at right now? We're going to kind of start talking, looking a little bit down the road. That's stuff that you guys need to start thinking about and know about. But if any questions about kind of where you're at right now, now is a great time. Okay, so some different options, and by far these are not the exhaustive option list. Okay, so there are a lot of different options out there. These are some of the main ones that we see students pursue. A lot of students, 86% of the class of 2015 actually enrolled in college at some level. So that's a really great thing that we think happens. But there are all kinds of different types of colleges. All right, so we have our general 4-year colleges. Okay, so those are going to be your typical college university experience. We have the 2 California institutions, the University of California with the 9 schools and the 23 CSU campuses. All right, we have our private schools, both in-state and out-of-state private schools. Many of those schools actually go through what's called the common application with big C, big A application. We also have our out-of-state public schools. Out-of-state public schools are typically not quite as well attended, primarily for financial reasons. Public institutions typically, even in the state of California, do not have big money bags to throw around at people saying, come to our school, like some of these private schools with their endowments and kind of more flexibility with how they spend some of their money. These public institutions are usually supported by tax money. So you won't typically see a lot of merit aid coming from UC Berkeley, Cal Poly. You're going to get need-based aid, which may or may not be a ton of money. Okay, so that's the difference there. Sometimes, and that's why sometimes going to a private school, while their sticker price might be $50,000, may actually be cheaper in the long run. Okay, so kind of you have to look at your different financial options as you go through this college process. We're not going to dive too deep into the financial aid process today. We'll answer a few questions about it and go through a little bit of the minute details, but financial aid is a senior year process. So I do not want to overload you with the financial aid process this year. We'll get there. And it is something that we walk people through every senior year. So we're pretty good at it by now. There's the community college system, and community college system is a great opportunity for students of all different levels, from 4.0 plus students to students who might have struggled in high school, maybe just barely graduated. Okay, it's a system designed to help students and bridge a gap or complete a need. Okay, at a community college, you can attain an associate's degree, which can open up career opportunities, receive additional training. That's essentially a 2-year degree program. You can also start a transfer pathway to a 4-year university of your choice anywhere, essentially. And that is a great pathway as well. It's something that students can take advantage of at any different point in their life. All right. One of the nice things I really like about the community college system actually is the fact that students who may not have had, maybe the most stellar 9th and 10th grade year, which is not uncommon, but maybe figured it out, which is fairly common. Between 10th and 11th grade, you may have noticed a change in your kids, hopefully. There's a weird phenomenon that happens between the summer, between 10th and 11th grade year for a lot of students, where sometimes all of a sudden it clicks together and they know why, or at least what they're doing in school. They may not love school, which not a ton of people really love school, but they may know why they're here and what the time is being used for. And all of a sudden their academics change around. Okay. And so that is something that we see those 2 years, maybe 9th to 10th grade, can impact what becomes options in their senior year. So sometimes students who maybe figured it out a little bit too late, they might have worked themselves out of an opportunity in, say, a 4-year college. This still keeps that door open, because once you apply as a transfer student through this community college system, you actually don't apply using your high school grades anymore. You get almost a fresh start. You get to start with all of your college work in those 60 transferable units in general for our state schools. Okay, so it's a great fresh start for maybe someone who's figured it out a little bit later. Trade and vocational schools, that's going to be your Universal Technical Institute, WyoTech, Culinary Institute of America. Those are a few examples of those types of schools. Great schools that sometimes have a high price tag, but are very specifically training you for a very targeted type of job. Okay, and usually get you through pretty quick. Usually 18 months or less, sometimes even as little as 6 to 8 months. You can be certified, ready to go out and get a job, typically making pretty good money. A lot of these vocations are things having to do with like welding, beauticians, mechanics, things like that. Mechanics is they make lots of money right now. They're, for the amount of time they're in school, the amount of education and costs to get there, they start out pretty close to what a typical maybe 4-year college graduate may be looking at. So it's not a horrible job opportunity. The career, so going straight to a career, if you found something that you really want to pursue, that's a great option as well. The growth factor there may be the limiting factor. So students may, unless you're like running a business like Steve Jobs, which is very, very, very small amount of people, you may have a great couple of years and then hit a bust year or 5, and that can be, there might not be anything really to fall back on. So that's the only thing that sometimes concerns me about going straight into a career field, but is a great thing. And then the military, Peace Corps, gap year, and study abroad opportunities. All right, so there's a lot of attention being paid to the gap year in the last couple of years, and especially this year with, I forget what her name is, Obama's little girl who just graduated from high school, taking a gap year. And so gap year is essentially a year that people use before they go to college, and it's used for a lot of different things. And I feel like my own professional opinion is mixed on the gap year. I think from my opinion, I feel like a lot of gap years are not utilized very well. It's used as I'm going to backpack through Europe year. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, I would love to be able to do that. It's pretty disrupting to an educational process, taking that year off without any type of formal education happening. Okay, so just remember that. It's not a bad thing to learn about yourself, but with the gap year, you do have to have some sort of a plan, an idea of what you're going to get out of it, because you're going to spend a year probably spending money. Typically, if you're living anywhere, it's not free. Even at home, there's costs involved with that too. But if you are going to be doing something outside of your own home area, you need to have some sort of payoff at the end, but you're also realizing that you're going to be typically losing about $50,000 every gap year that you take. Okay, because if you're taking a gap year, that means it's probably going to be an extra year before you graduate from college. That $50,000, that's about an average college graduate salary. Okay, so just remember that. Are you willing to possibly give up? Is your experience worth that $50,000? Sometimes it is. And sometimes you learn about yourself, you make a better decision about what you want to do in college, what you want to pursue as a career, and that's awesome. But sometimes you don't, and sometimes it's a waste of time. It's a fun waste of time usually, but it might not be the best use of time. So kind of looking particularly at some of the four-year colleges, because that is going to be a competitive admissions environment. All right, students in four-year colleges are going to be competing for seats at that school. The two-year college trade school, they're what's considered a non-competitive environment. They're not going to be asking students to send in things like SAT scores. Typically the application, it wouldn't even be called it's an enrollment form. It's not an application. And so they're not going to deny anybody as long as you meet a few very minimum qualifications, like graduated from high school. And I don't even think you even need that. You need to complete a certain amount of high school to be eligible for that degree process. So it's a little bit different on that two-year stuff, which is why we don't spend quite as much time kind of walking through, because this is a much more complicated process. But in essence, I'd like to use this picture to describe what college admissions really looks like. Okay, and there's one system and exception that does kind of do this. But to give you an example, let you kind of visualize what that looks like, I'd like someone to please describe this tree. Can you describe what the tree looks like? Yep. I could say it's brown,
Okay.
right?
Different colors.
Okay.
Brown and gray.
So without belaboring the point, it's really hard to describe what this tree is like, right? You're too zoomed in. Okay, you can't see enough of the tree. This is what most people's view and belief is about what college admissions actually looks like. They think that colleges look at students like this. They look at them like I'm taking a very, very small snapshot of the student. Okay, and I argue, and from evidence, this is a very small portion of what colleges look at. The biggest one that actually does, unfortunately, kind of do this is our CSU system. You are kind of this snapshot, okay? You break down to a GPA, the classes you've taken, and a test score for the CSUs. No essays, no letters, nothing about community service. You become a number on a piece of paper. And that's fairly unfortunate in my mind, because I think they miss out on a lot of great students who maybe don't fit that mold. But that's the main institution system that really looks at this, all right? However, most schools actually look at this. Okay, this is what they call comprehensive review, or holistic review is another way that sometimes you'll hear it be said. They actually take the zoomed out lens in most schools, and it kind of expands from the CSUs have that zoomed in picture of that little trunk area to the UCs kind of zoom out a little bit. They might not have the entire tree in there, but they can actually see what kind of tree it is. They can see if it's alive, if it's dead, a lot of different factors that go along with it. And then most of the private schools actually zoom out about this far and get the entire perspective as much as kind of feasibly possible on a college application. Some of the ways that they do that is actually, and this is straight from the UCs, is they actually look at a lot of different factors in students. All right, from GPAs, test scores, which are kind of basics and foundational pieces, to things like your personal statements, teachers and my counselor recommendations. So we write letters or recommendations for students. Personal essays, okay? Experiences in study abroad, it's experience in community service. Those all give more context to your application as a college, as a student applying to college. So that's why we say when we say community service, it's not because necessarily we just want you guys to go volunteer in the community. We think that's a great idea. We want to get back to our community, but it's going to help you in the future. And so that's where doing above and beyond that 30-hour requirement is really going to pay off. All right, because I can look at a transcript of a student and I can look at this and say, this is a pretty, what I would call roughly average student. Okay, they've taken some, challenge themselves with some hard classes. They've got a few A's and B's, maybe a C here or there. Okay, but roughly average, maybe a little bit upper average at times. But they might not know that their parent got divorced in their junior year, or they're homeless, or they grew up with a life debilitating disease. Okay, so they can't see a lot of these things that really, those essays, personal statements, and activities that you're involved in really give light and bring life to your college application work. Okay, so that's why we're saying make good relationships with your teachers. Get involved with something that's consistent, because that is what's going to help you not only understand who you are as a person and as a student and a college student, but it will also give the colleges an opportunity to get to know that as well, when you can represent that in some of those forms. Any questions about comprehensive review? Was that surprising to anybody, knowing that they look at that? It was to me the first time I heard about it. I always pictured that really zoomed in picture, but that's actually different. So this is kind of what a lot of people will use as a general piece of advice for building a college list, because while you might not have a college list now, over this next year, the goal is that you will start researching and thinking about, and we will guide you through some of that process. Some of it will happen at home, but some of it will happen at school. And by this time next year, you should have a pretty close list of where you might be applying to if you're looking at four-year colleges. Colleges, again, non-competitive, so you don't necessarily have to have 5 or 7 different community colleges you're applying to. We need to research one and pick the one that's going to be the best fit for a student. Same thing with those trade schools or the military or things like that. You can have four-year college, community college. You can look at all those different options all at the same time as well. Okay, but this is kind of a general guide that we use. Most students, and I've had students way over in like 20 application land, and students who are crazy in like the 2 application land, but typically anywhere between 5 and 10, with 7 kind of being that magic number. That's kind of the number of four-year college applications that you're probably going to need to kind of nail down as what's going to be kind of giving you the best return on your time and money investment. Okay, because everything is competitive. So what we kind of break it down is, so the reach, target, and safety. Those terms, and safety by no means do I ever mean safe. That's just the closest thing we have to kind of describing what it is. The reach schools are going to be something that either, one, everybody is going to have statistically a hard time getting into. That's going to be your Stanfords, Harvards, MITs. Doesn't matter if you are a perfect high school student. You could have it, never get anything other than A, perfect SAT scores. You can still get denied, and the statistics say that you will, to Stanford, to all those wonderful, highly prestigious schools. Okay, and just on that note, there's a lot of I get a lot of people, well, what's a good college for me? And I'll say anyone that you like. Okay, there's no such thing. I want to dispel this myth right now. There's no such thing as a good college. Which one's the best college? The prestige of a college is not typically associated necessarily even with their academics. The prestige of their college is typically associated with their alumni, okay, who not necessarily made their success while at Harvard or MIT. They typically made their success while in the business world because, they either had super rich parents who bought a building there and they actually kind of floated through their process, or they actually, figured that out and were entrepreneurials and learned that stuff typically in real life. They were go-getters. They filled that desire to seek things out. Okay. The other thing that actually kind of builds this prestige level, which is actually typically where students actually start to populate their lists, is sports. Okay, most of the schools that are pretty prestigious are going to have pretty big name sports teams. Okay, in whatever sport that might be. So those are typically the first list of schools that I see. We see the Michigans, we see the Berkeleys, we see the UCLAs, the USCs. Okay, those are typically up there on the list for people, not necessarily because they even really know that much about the school, but they know that they're a big deal because they see them on TV. Okay, so that's just something I want to kind of dispel a little bit of, is we want to find the best fit for your student. Okay, and fit goes 2 ways. That word, you'll see fit quite often in a lot of different resources and a lot of different books, websites, things you might be researching about college. And what the idea behind fit is that, one, when the student is trying to fit to a college, that means this is what we're talking about. We want to try to fit you to that college's expectations. Okay, does your GPA, does your activities, does your class list, does your grades, does your test scores, and a bunch of other factors fit what a typical student that's being admitted to the school looks like? Okay, Naviance is a great tool to be able to look some of that stuff up. They have 25th, 50th, 75th percentiles for GPAs, SAT scores, ACT scores. You can kind of see kind of where you are falling in comparison to other admitted undergraduate students. All right, so that's one directional fit. The other direction that a lot of people actually forget, which in my opinion is the more important piece, is actually how well does that college fit you as a student and a growing adult? Okay, that's sometimes skipped over to say, well, my GPA is not good enough for this school. Okay, well, is the fit really that good either? Okay, because it might not be. There are a lot of schools where a student might be up here, and this school might not necessarily have the clout of some of the other schools, but their fit makes the school way up here for that student. Okay, so that's going to be things like campus culture. Okay, how big is the campus? Is it a huge, giant 50,000 person school coming from a place like North Tahoe of 400? That might be a little bit of a culture shock. Okay, you're moving to a town the size of Carson City. Or a school the size of Carson City. That's a pretty big jump for a lot of students. And many times they might not be happy there if they've never experienced that before. Other times they may be totally stoked on that. Political climate. I mean, students might have determined, especially when they get to Miss J's class, determined their own political kind of ideologies. If they don't agree kind of with what the general political climate is on that campus, they might find themselves fairly unhappy. LGBT acceptance, sports that are on campus, how the courses are taught, what is their school's priorities? Is it like a UC, which is more research-based, or is it a CSU, which is designed as a teaching campus? Okay, who do you want to be teaching your classes? Do you want a graduate assistant or a professor? Okay, those are all things that each student is going to have to determine for themselves as to what is their best fit. And they might not find the 100% best fit, but you want to find the closest thing you can get. Okay, and then hopefully your stats will also meet that school, and it's kind of like Match.com. It's like a perfect little match made in heaven, and they make a commercial, and it's perfect. All right, so the 2 reach schools are definitely not needed. You do not have to have a reach school on those lists, but if you do, you probably want no more than 1 or 2. All right, so those are the schools with the really low acceptance rate, the school that maybe you don't quite meet what they're looking for, but you still want to have an opportunity to apply. You say, I'm going to go for it, and we'll see what happens. Because people ask, well, should I apply? Well, I'm like, do you actually want to go there? And they say, well, yeah. I'm like, well, if you don't apply, it's an automatic no. So ultimately, yes, if you actually want to go to a school, always apply. But you want to spread that out. It's kind of like diversifying your stocks. You don't want to just put all your money in one place. The target schools are kind of be schools that kind of are that we fit both directional. All right, we are pretty good. We're pretty confident. Our scores, our background, our experience in high school kind of matches similar to what they're expecting. All right, and then a safety school. And again, I always note nothing is safe. They might say we have 100% acceptance rate. Probably not. They probably denied someone in the past. Okay, so always assume everything is not safe. But those are schools that you kind of exceed maybe what they might be setting up for you. All right, so that's something just to keep an eye out for. Never should your safety school, it does not say settle school. Okay, that's not what's up there. All these schools should be, if you should be happy as a student attending any one of these schools that you apply to. So I get a lot of things that said, well, I applied to these 5 schools and then I applied to Sacramento State. I don't really want to go to Sacramento State. My mom told me I needed to apply to Sacramento State. Mr. Ream told me I needed to apply to Sacramento State. And I don't really want to go there though, but I applied anyways. Okay. Murphy's Law says you're going to get denied to all those other 5 schools and you are going to get in and have to go to Sacramento State. Okay. So every school you should be happy arriving at. Okay, so that's why this research process will take some time. You got to gather this. You might have to go visit. That's the #1 way that I see students decide whether this is the school for me or not the school for me. I've had students, the school be #1 on their list. They visited and it was not even on the list anymore. Okay, that's how big of a difference it makes, because when you look on the websites are great resources. They spout a lot of great information, have a bunch of pretty pictures, but they never take pictures of the ugly parts of campus or the ghetto across the street, or kind of Skid Row you got to walk through to get to campus. That's not the pretty stuff that they put on their website that you'll want to experience to see if this is for you. All right, we talked about the junior college admissions, so we'll skip this one. So some things to get started on. We kind of start about what are your must-haves. I usually advise students to start a list. What are my must-haves on one side? What are my must-have nots? Parents, you can make one too. Kind of match your list together and see what they might look like. Keeping in mind the kids' kind of must-haves and must-have-nots typically take it priority, unless there's some like major, this is a fundamental must-have-not type thing. But some of those big things are your location. That's usually where a lot of that starts. Okay, how close do I want to live to home, or how far away can I get from home? Those types of questions may be on different lists. How big? That is a big one. How big of a school do you want to go to? Because it might sound really awesome and romantic to go to a big city and like experience all the cultures and the 50,000 kids at school until you actually get there and you're like, nobody cares about me. Okay, that's going to be a big change for a lot of students. Okay, living in a mountain town like this, coming to a small high school like this, there's a lot of people that know who you are, okay, that care about you. When you're in a big city, that oftentimes goes away. You might have to seek that out. All right, so that's just a big important factor. If you play a sport, do they actually have that sport at the level you're seeking to compete it in? All right, are you prepared to compete at that level as well? Level of prestige, we talked about that. Admissibility, that's going to be kind of like, you know, a lot of those admissions requirements, the holistic review we talked about. Demographics, how diverse do you want your campus to be, or how non-diverse if you're seeking that out as well. And any special interest. Do you need a specific program at the school? Do you have special needs and you need a very strong student support service at that school to help you walk through that process? All right, and then the second thing is creating a system. And we'll be working with students to help create a system, but I would suggest in this day and age, students will be using Naviance. Okay, there's a great way to start building that tool. It's a tool that I can actually check and see their progress, so it actually saves me and you guys at time and me. What schools are you applying to? What schools are you applying to? There's a tool in there that says colleges I'm thinking about. If you have a list started or you want to start building a list, plugging in there, I can pull that up before any meeting we have and say, okay, looks like they're wanting to apply to mostly CSUs, but they have like one really like random school on there. I'm going to ask some questions probably about that. Why this school? What's going on here? Okay. Or I might say, hey, you know, it looks like you're applying to all these schools. You know, they're pretty hard schools. Have you ever thought about maybe adding, here's another school that's fairly similar in their ideology, some of the stuff that they offer, but it might be a little bit less risky of a school to apply to. It might become more of a good fit or a safety school for you, but still meet some of those needs that are similar to this school. Because so it helps me kind of follow along with that process. The other thing is you can also track one at home. This day and age with Google Drive, things like that, it makes it really easy that you can share it with me, you can share it with a parent to start a spreadsheet. Write down schools you're thinking about, write down their average cost of attendance, write down their deadlines, write down average GPAs, average test scores. You can keep it all in one spot. You can also practice your Excel skills. So that's a great way to really start that process. Okay, there's a bunch of different ways, other ways you can do it as well, binders, notebooks, whatever works for you. The big thing is start thinking about it and start writing things down. Because what you'll do, especially you students, is you will spend an hour on a Saturday doing some research, and then I'll see you on Tuesday. Hey, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, I did some college research. Oh, really? Tell me about it. And they don't remember. You don't remember. So if you do all this research, you want to write down a few of the key points that you're really looking for. In Naviance, there's a SuperMatch college search, and what this is a really great tool that is essentially Google for colleges, and you can list a bunch of different features that you're seeking. Okay, this is a good way to find kind of a fit in a little bit of both ways. But you can enter things like, okay, what's my GPA right now? What are some of my test scores? What location am I looking for? And as you enter these criteria, the search will actually pull up the information and repopulate that list with schools that fit or closely fit those required attributes that you entered. So it's a wonderful tool, and you can actually save those later. The last thing I'll mention is that visit. Just make sure that you do that. Now is a good time. So this year is a wonderful time to make that happen. A lot of people ask, should I go during break? And go whenever you have the availability to, okay? Hopefully our breaks won't necessarily align with the school's breaks because it's usually a better experience if you go while school's in session. Typically it's a little bit easier to get a tour, plus you get the full kind of environment feel. If you go to an empty ghost town campus, you'll be like, oh, it looks really pretty here. And it might not be what you're hoping for when you show up. So try to go when they're in session, but if you can't, and that's what you can do, do whatever you can to get on that campus and maybe ask some questions. The tour is a wonderful opportunity, but even if you can't, bare bones, you're driving down to LA, you pass a school, let's pull over, let's go there for an hour, walk around campus. Okay, see if you can pick up some flyers, contact them later and see if you can get some phone information or something like that. So the PSAT, kind of switching gears a little bit. Any questions about kind of college admissions from the generalist perspective? We're going to talk testing now for a little bit. Yes.
I have a question about community colleges.
Sure.
Can you transfer
to any community college in California? When you start at one, you can transfer anywhere?
So like if you went to Sierra College for a year, you wanted to go to Cabrillo for the next year.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on it, but I would say likely. It would probably make things pretty complicated though. That would probably be a better question for maybe someone. They have counselors at the community college, so I don't really know about that transfer process in that depth.
But you have to go 2 years.
So it's not necessarily 2 years. It's a unit requirement
Oh.
to transfer specifically to a CSU or UC. You need to have 60 transferable units. Okay, so that's going to be your and that's typically about 2 years worth. At times it can take 3 or 5, depending on how quickly you work through those units. It also depends on how well of a plan you have. Okay. The main problem I think that community colleges are facing right now is that, one, they are not competitive. Okay, meaning they're going to take anybody that wants to come. That does not mean that they're going to build classes in for everybody that's enrolled in their school. Okay, so some of the problems that come up are classes get full really fast, and you might not get the class that you need. You might not get Bio 101 your freshman fall, which then you need to take Bio 102. So it puts you back essentially another year. It kind of creates a trickle-down effect. So you have to be very well planned out, and that's where working with like a transfer counselor or counselor at the college really pays off, because they can build you that plan of study. But transferring between 2 schools, I'm not really 100% sure. But you can. One thing you can do. So the 60 transferable units is strictly for our CSUs and UCs. A lot of private schools, if you're thinking about that, students can take 1 year of a community college set of courses and then transfer into a private school. They don't have those stipulations, and it'll be a by campus process for that. PSAT and the NMSQT, those are, I don't know why they named it so long, but the NMSQT means the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. National Merit Scholarship is a program that almost nobody wins, but they still test you on it, and you have to score in like the 99.9th percentile to even get close to touching money from this. So most likely it's not. I've never known anybody that's had one of these students. So the likelihood is very small that this will necessarily be you, but it might be. You never know. Work hard. The big thing is don't study for necessarily spend a bunch of time and money studying for the PSAT. It is a practice. That is what you should be practicing by doing this. It's not to study, to practice. The NMSQT, like I said, sometimes people really get into like preparing for that. It's not really worth it, in my opinion, because the likelihood is infinitesimally small that you will even make like an honor or like semi-finalist position. But we are going to be taking the PSAT. We are actually be paying for all sophomores and all juniors this year. So we didn't pay in the past years, but we are just going to pay for everybody. And everyone's going to take it, all juniors and sophomores, and that's going to be Wednesday, November 2nd. It's at school. They just need to come in the morning. And we will have a pre-administration session in October, which we'll bubble in a bunch of stuff. So it'll be another day that all students will need to make sure that they're here for. PSAT, like I said, it's actually the preliminary SAT, not necessarily practice. I like to practice; it's better. But it's an indicator of the strengths and weaknesses on the SAT. Okay, so again, the only people that will ever see your PSAT scores are you guys and us. It's not a part of your college admissions process. Okay, it is strictly an indicator. So I do not want you. Sometimes people really freak out because they didn't score how they wanted to on the PSAT. Again, indicator, but shouldn't be like earth-shattering. All right, so the big thing is you guys identify if that's you. Here's where I was. Here's where I want to be, and then let's put some things into place where we can make that better. There's a lot of great prep tools that we have actually available for you. Take out that second bullet about adding those scores up, because it's the current SAT. It's not even the new SAT anymore. So a couple factors about the SAT. There's 4 different parts, 2 main components: the reading, writing, and language component, and the math component. And there's a third optional component, which is the essay the essay component. Writing is separate. So you'll see the score is now back to, if you guys are familiar with the older one, which actually changed in February of this last year, from a 2400 scale, it's back to what it was like when I was in high school, of a 1600 scale again. Okay, so you're going to get 2 scores, the math and essentially the English. 800 out of each is your maximum score, combined total of 1600. And then the optional essay is scored separately, so it's not included in that 1600 points. My advice about the optional essay from all the information I've gathered and just what I feel is common sense is that I would suggest taking the essay every time you take the SAT. It's about another 50 minutes on your Saturday that you're gonna have to get up, which you've already been up really early and sat for 3 hours. There's still a lot of very consistent information from colleges about what they're going to be doing with this. This is the first full year that we're going to have this exam in this format. So colleges, this is the first admissions class going through this year that will actually even see this on their application process. Okay, so UCs have already said that they're going to be requiring the option, at least one essay component, and a lot of the private schools, CSUs, will not require the essay component. So my advice is just take it every time you do it. It's much better to have it and not need it and then need it and not have it later. Okay, because I don't even know what they would do if they need it and you only had one. Will they take that one? Will they only take from the same sitting? There's a lot of ifs that we still don't have answers for from the colleges. It's back to only 4 answer choices. So there's not A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, bubble in your favorite answer or all the above. Back to only 4. Okay, and a big thing is there is no penalty for wrong answers. That is a huge change. Okay, big. Okay, because what used to happen on the old SAT was students used to actually have to learn statistics to actually be successful on the exam. Because what would happen is they'd have 4 or 5 different choices to choose from on their question and say they didn't really know the answer. Most people would say skip it and come back to it later, but say you come back to it later, you're going to want to hopefully scientifically guess, right? That's usually a good multiple guess answer technique. But what happens on the old system is they'd actually set it up where you actually lost 1/4 point for a wrong answer and you lost no points for a blank. Okay, so students would actually have to sit there and say, okay, is it better for me to answer and risk losing 1/4 point or to leave it blank and risk nothing? Okay, on this system, fill every answer in, do not leave an unbubbled circle. Okay, you lose no penalty for marking it, for not marking it. They're all the same. You're either going to get it right or get it wrong. Okay, so never leave anything unguessed on your SAT going forward. So a couple habits from the SAT that they tell us that's really good for you guys to do. And the good news is, and it actually kind of gives more relevance to the classes you guys are taking, is it actually feeds directly into the classes that you're enrolled in. All right, for those junior and senior year, they're modeling kind of what they expect a typical junior or senior to be taking at that time. Okay, so that is going to be what they are testing you on. So it gives relevance and meaning to studying for that retention, because you will see it again. Okay, they are looking much more deeper at the comprehension, looking at the critical thinking piece, all those types of things. These are not the same questions of, like or as, which one is this? It's more in depth. It's not just kind of random facts of information. It's tied to your content. Do your homework, start studying for tests and quizzes a little bit more now, and then answer and ask a lot of questions in class. Okay, that inquiry piece is a very important thing because that's what's going to help you learn how to do that, not only in the classes that you find easy, but classes you find difficult to get help, but also understand more for this SAT. There's also a sister test called the ACT. And with this revision, the SAT has become a lot more similar to the ACT. Most students at our school take the SAT over the ACT, but the ACT has been gaining strides primarily because of, I think, this change that they've had in the last year. We weren't really sure there was a lot of unknowns on that. I think a lot of that has been solved. There's a lot more confidence in the SAT at this point based on kind of seeing what happened with it. So I think that typically the SAT kind of will build back in its strides, but there is a sister test. They are interchangeable. Students can take both, and they should. My advice is to take both, but you can take only the ACT, or you can only take the SAT, or you can do a smattering of both, and you can apply to all the colleges you want. Okay, there's not a single college that I'm aware of that will only take the ACT or only take the SAT or only have you take one of them. Okay, so that doesn't matter which one you take. My advice is take the one that fits you better. Okay, and usually at very first, we'll kind of go over a timeline in just a second. Take one of each. See how you do. Get your scores back. See how it felt. Did you feel more comfortable? Was one more feel like you were more confident in? Then start sitting for that one. Okay, that's going to be one that's probably going to represent you well and better throughout the upcoming tests, because your first test is typically not going to be your greatest. Second test gets a little bit better. Third, fourth, and fifth, if you go that far, is usually kind of where you start hitting your stride. You hit like 6 or 7, and you start plateauing and wasting money. Okay, so that's kind of where that number kind of comes in. But the ACT has 5 different components to it: in English, math, reading, science. So it actually adds a science component. So strong science students can sometimes actually find some benefit in taking the ACT for that reason. And then again, an optional writing test. We actually, the score differences, so it's fairly different scoring, 1 through 36 on the ACT. And so the math actually, I think the SAT math, this might be old data, the SAT math actually went up, I think. I think it's up into kind of similar trigonometry, kind of pre-calculus range now. But it's fairly similar, so you can expect kind of algebra 2-ish up to algebra 2 level. But again, all the way back through algebra level. Okay, you need to be able to do all those skills. We have prep available for students. Okay, so we actually just changed in your Naviance account. We actually just changed over from having an SAT prep within there to an ACT prep. And I had someone this morning just tell me it's great. It's awesome. I haven't done the ACT one. I did the SAT one and it was awesome. ACT sounds like it's going really well. So that's a great tool. We used to have the SAT, but Khan Academy actually has free official SAT prep directly tied to the College Board. So they're the first to get any released questions from the SATs, any released full-length tests. They actually they have an adaptive program that ties to your PSAT scores. So we didn't want to offer 2 of the same thing. Do the SAT one through Khan Academy. I've heard wonderful things about it. If you want to prep for the ACT, do it through Naviance, 2 free versions. There's a bunch of other cost ones online or down in Reno that can be available as well. But those are 2 that you should probably start with and see if you need additional ones from there. Okay. The last one is we every year, and I have word that we'll probably be doing it this year. I don't have any official data or information about it yet, but we offer in the past, and if it continues, a half-day workshop for the SAT, typically for juniors and seniors. Limited spaces though, so signups will become an issue. So please make sure you listen for announcements and emails and phone calls, because I'll be letting you guys know when that will become available once we have some more information. I believe, when did we do it last year? I think it's sometime later in the fall. So we'll have to ask Mitchell about that this week to see if we have any line on when we can get that in. So again, timeline for taking those tests. Most students, again, you're going to take the PSAT in November. You're probably going to get your scores back on that PSAT. Typically, probably either very, very late December, so probably not until January when you actually get them in your hands from me. And they've also started emailing them out, I think, as well. But January is kind of the expected timeline for those PSAT results to come back. January, December timeframe is also kind of my suggested when I'm going to start taking my first SAT or ACT timeframe as well. Okay, so that's something that you guys need to have on your radar. Registration actually goes through each respective school test website. So it's not, I get a lot of questions. Can you please sign me up for the SAT? Unfortunately, I do not sign people up for the SAT. That actually goes through the College Board and through the ACT. So you go to their websites and they actually have a process, and the SAT is fairly lengthy, that they walk you through and actually get you signed up. If you are on free or reduced lunch at school, you actually do qualify for 2 free tests in either one. So you get a waiver, as well as 4 college application fee waivers for colleges that accept it, that come through there. But each of those happen, and December, January is that time frame when I suggest starting to look at taking your first 1 or 2. Okay, my goal for students is I would love for students to take try to do 2 of the same tests. So if you're going to do the SAT and the ACT, do that in like January, February sometime. Look at your results. Look at what happened. Spend some time prepping, and then do like a May or June test. Right? I always suggest one of the end of the school year and your junior year tests, because you're not going to forget everything before you go to summer. So that's a good one to take as you sit for that one. And then you come back in the fall and you actually take it probably 1 or 2 more times, depending on how you're doing and what your goals are for some of those scores. Okay. Typical last day that you can take a test for college admissions, at least in California, and it's a pretty general guideline, is the December sitting of your senior year. Okay. Question.
Yeah, you keep your best score, or it's an average?
Good question. So every time you take a test, you're going to get a new score, so they don't average out anything. But they'll, when you order tests, when you just order them, it's going to come with every test that you've taken. Okay, and most schools, that's almost always what I suggest. It's only if you have very particular reasons of, like, I woke up 5 seconds before I was supposed to take the test, then I wrote my name and that was all I did. Like, but then the next time you rocked it. Like that would be maybe something like, okay, maybe you might want to selectively send that. But if your scores are not increasing like by like hundreds of points, the school's job, I had a lot of college admissions people tell me this, and I think it also is kind of like that comprehensive review is a little bit different viewpoint. A college admissions officer's job is not to deny people. It's to admit people and to admit the most qualified students. So they're not going to hold a piece of information against you. They're going to use whatever you can send them that best qualifies you for that spot at that school and give you the benefit of the doubt. Okay. So if you had a poor score and then you had a better score, you're like, well, I only want to send that good score. You can. There's a way to do that. And it's just going to cost you like an extra $30 per score report that you're going to send, and you're going to send quite a few of them. So it's going to get fairly expensive if you want to pay for that privilege of doing that. In my opinion, it's not worth the money. Okay. They actually typically don't even see some of those other scores. It's not like they're going to be like, well, I wonder what happened on that day. They're going to look at it and say, okay, this is what the student can bring to the table. They don't have that long. If you come to that event, you'll see how long they actually have to review these things. They can't go and psychoanalyze like your entire score history. Like they're not going to spend the time to do that. But that's a great question. Some schools, though, they do it in different ways, where some schools will actually look at single test sittings. All right, so they'll say, okay, you scored this on your December test. Okay, that's your highest score. This is what we're going to be using to consider your application with. Some schools, and most typically private schools, will actually do what's called super score, meaning they'll take, okay, your English component of this test and your math component of this test on 2 different dates and combine them together for a larger, typically, super score. Okay, that can be helpful and it can be hurtful, because if you might have the highest single sitting, but when you combine scores together, someone else might actually have a higher super score than you. Kind of weird how it works, but sometimes it can actually bite you in the foot a little bit. So again, as we're looking at testing, my suggestion is about 3 to 5 times, and typically 2 or 3 in the spring-ish timeframe of your junior year, 1 or 2 in the fall of your senior year, until you are happy with the score that you're able to submit to colleges, typically no later than December. In junior pathways this year, students will also be working on their resume and cover letter and interviewing skills. So we're not just college stuff, a lot of career-focused things, which actually ties fairly closely. Many schools will ask for things like resumes. It helps you kind of solidify what your background is. So it helps you kind of look at yourself, what your activities have been. So that's an activity that they'll be doing. And, if you've been in our school before, 9th and 10th grade pathways is a little bit not quite as intense. It's a little bit more kind of, let's make sure you guys are just like here, breathing, doing what you need to do, like getting you through the next couple of years. Junior and senior pathways are pretty intense. Like you guys are going to be put to work. There's going to be a lot of expectations of you, and a lot of things happen at very quick timelines. You'll develop portfolios. You'll work on college application stuff. So it is something that you guys will find useful. Keep track of things that you guys do. Hopefully you've been tracking kind of important attributes throughout your high school career. Okay, awards you've received, community service you've done. Okay, because that'll be handy when you guys have to pull it out and accurately represent that on college applications. Okay, so you're not having to make things up as you go. In the winter, spring, you're going to take those tests. There's a junior resource fair that all juniors will attend. It's going to be, I think it's in March this year. We announce it, and everyone's like, they're like, I don't want to go to that. Everybody comes back and they love it. We have people that you come dressed up. We hand out money. Okay, and it's kind of like a little mini fair. You go around to 10 different stations, and we have people from the community, from the Human Resources Association. They come and talk about do's and do nots at job interviews and job applications. We have college people come and talk about college, both at the 2-year and 4-year level. Financial aid, different people that we have a mini job fair set up, so you can see some of the different area careers or things that you can go into after high school. So that's a great opportunity for students. We'll get more information about that later. Keeping your grades up. And then in May, I would suggest sitting for as many AP exams as feasibly possible. I say feasibly possible, meaning it's very expensive. We all know that. And 2, it's time consuming and stressful. But typically, if you are able to pass an AP exam, that's typically on most schools accept is a 3, 4, or 5 out of 5. That will save you thousands of dollars when you enroll in college. Okay, so I'd highly encourage you, if you're passing it with a A or B, put in the study time and sit for it. And most, I think you can likely do it if you put in the effort on your side of the equation. All right. I think we're pretty much finished with now. I'm not going to go through the Naviance component at this point. I'll be in the junior pathways in a couple weeks and actually walk you through some of the information with the students. A lot of you guys might have got an email from me about Naviance recently. It had a registration code that you can access. If you did not get that email, please go back and double check. But if you did not get it, feel free to email me. Parents can have an account as well. It's essentially the same feature set, except it gives you a little bit less permissions to do certain things like submit applications and stuff like that. But you can use the same research tools, the same information, kind of follow along with your student progress to a certain level. So feel free to email me that if you did not get that email. I can give you that registration code as well. Okay. But again, it's a very big resource tool. We will be using it increasingly throughout this year. So I want you guys just to be aware of kind of like what it means when I say your student needs to be on Naviance. This is what I'm talking about. And they will it's more of a student tool that they should understand a little bit more so than parents. But right now, I think we're pretty much out of time. So I don't want to spend much more of your evening unless you guys have some particular questions. Does anybody have any questions that are burning to be answered right now? I'm happy to spend some time answering questions. If you guys need to leave, feel free to. I'll be taking audience questions, but yes.
Previously you said it saves you thousands of dollars. What did you mean by that?
For the AP exam, so the AP classes, so advanced placement is essentially a college level course that you take at the high school level. And while you take the class, that does not earn you anything other than high school credit. When you take the test, by passing the test, you can actually submit those tests to the colleges, and they actually give you college credit for those tests. Right. So a student can take 5 or 6 different AP classes, pass all those exams, and come in with 15 to 20 college credits at about $500 to $800 a credit. It's a big chunk of change when you add it all up. So that's kind of like what that means. And so that's how they actually earn the college credit for it. Any other questions? Yes.
I heard that the financial aid deadlines have changed.
They did. So October 1st is the new opening for the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, but it is not till your senior year. So do not do it this year. It is not the correct year for you to fill that out. It has changed. The only main other change that you really need to know about at this point is that it does change also the year of the tax information that you're using. Okay, so for your tax information, if I'm counting correctly, it's prior years. So it's not when your student is a senior in the spring of their senior year, when they're about to go to college, it is not the taxes that you are now completing, it's the ones you have completed. So that would be from this current year. 2016 taxes will be what you use when you apply as a senior. Okay, so that's a a little bit of a difference from the years prior, which would have been, you would be using the 2017.
So you had
taxes.
to wait, you had to get your taxes.
Yep, and that was a major problem why they started to look at those earlier dates as well.
Okay.
It's a good change. Some people might hate it because you might have had a really large year or a really low year, so it might impact your finances a little bit more than others. But the big thing is hypothetically, we haven't seen it in action yet, but it should give students more opportunity to get earlier notice about the financial aid package, because we do it backwards. You apply to school, you try to guess how much it's going to cost, you get all your admissions decisions, and then way out in like April, they're going to send, okay, here's what it's going to cost you to come to our school. And then you have like 3 weeks to decide if you're going to go there. Hopefully that time frame, and the idea is that time frame will move up longer. You have much longer time to decide.
And then you help with local application, local financial aid.
Yep. So we have local scholarship applications, local and regional ones kind of come through my office. Many of the national bigger ones, your Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Dr. Pepper, kick a football through the uprights for $1 million. That goes through typically FastWeb, other large national scholarship searches. I think they're really more like sweepstakes than anything. So it's really think about your time for money. But local, regional ones and the schools are going to be, apart from the FAFSA, where you're going to get most of your money for college.
So we should not come to I thought I saw that the financial aid thing was on your.
You can come and get the lay of the land if you want to find things out. Just know that things change every year, so it likely may change. But you can come and get some precursor information if you want. I record those as well. If you don't want to come that evening, you can watch them online and just skip through the boring parts or the parts that are not applicable. But yeah, you can come, you're invited, but it's definitely something you probably will want to revisit as a senior as well. You're welcome. See you guys. Any other questions? Yes.
What's the typical path moving forward for kids that are doing English 1A at Sierra?
So as a junior, if students are taking English 1A, students can either continue that path and take English 1B in their senior year. They can come back and take English here. It's much easier if they start there and want to come back than vice versa. If they took English here as a junior and then wanted to go to Sierra College as a senior, there's a lot more hoops to jump through. It's either way.
Okay, but the 1A is a semester course.
Correct.
It's college, and that counts for a year at high school, or?
Yeah, so it'll fill 10 credits of their high school, so it's essentially equivalent to 1 year of their junior English. I suggest, some people are like, well, I really want to do it back to back. Most time, the spring semester is kind of wonky semester at the college just because of it's a little bit lower enrollment at times. Plus, it makes it a little more challenging, I think, for students in that spring semester. So typically, I would suggest either waiting until summer or the fall of their senior year. Plus, it also makes it nice as they're doing it right before they go into that college application season or in the midst of that college application season. Having that writing happen during that time frame really helps just because it brings up all the important things I need to remember about writing those college essays, like grammar and syntax, things like that. So that's kind of the time frame that we typically, I would suggest having an English class in every academic year that they're taking in high school. Any other questions? Otherwise, we are all done. Yes.
Where will this be posted?
It will be on those. Do you remember that slide that I were you here? Let me back up to
Yeah, I'll put the link.
the grade level resource folders. Let me see if I can get all the way back there. So here. So if you go to the website under the counseling menu, it will be. I don't believe it's up there for this grade level yet. Under the counseling resources, it says grade level resource folders, and then you'll find the junior folder, and then that's where it'll be in PDF format. Anything else?
Sorry, last question.
Sure.
When you said take the 2 to 3 tests in spring, is that a combination of SAT, ACT, or are you saying do 2 to 3 of each?
No, it's pretty much a combination. So you can do as many as you like. It just gets expensive and time consuming. But normal would be like if you took SAT in January, ACT in February, and maybe another SAT or ACT in like April, May, June sometime. 3 combined, like total, is probably what's manageable. You might take 4, you could probably take 5, but that's usually about all you can really fit in anyways. So it's usually about 3. You're looking for 5 or 6 total tests that you've taken. Yeah, so that's usually what works out the best. All right, thanks you guys. We'll see you guys next time.